Hello, everyone. I'm Riley King, and welcome to this special right here on the Riley King Network. Let's begin. Welcome to this special ABC News and WMUR TV Democratic Debate Recap. As you all know, last night in New Hampshire on the campus of St. Anselm College was the Democratic debate with 7 candidates before the big New Hampshire primary voting that will be coming this coming Tuesday. If you did not watch last night's debate, we will give you a recap of what happened, everything you need to know what happened at last night's debate. We'll give you that recap. But if you did watch last night's debate, please comment below and let us know what you thought of the debate last night. And, it was like a big Super Bowl for New Hampshire for people that love politics. This was like a Super Bowl last night, so very cool indeed. So, let's dive in and get started with this special right here on the Riley King Network. If you want to watch the debate again or did not get to watch the debate, we have a link for you that we shared on the Riley King Network Facebook page. Watch the entire 2020 New Hampshire Democratic presidential debate. Debate was held at St. Anselm College in Manchester. 7 Democrats vying for the party's presidential nomination took the stage Friday night at St. Anselm College for the final presidential debate before the big New Hampshire primary elections. Primary elections are Tuesday, February 11th. You can rewatch the debate by hour 1, hour 2, and hour 3. There were 3 hours from the debate last night. Rewatch the debate by topics. Candidate introduction. Addressing socialism, unifying the country. U.S. healthcare system, impeachment trial, Trump adequate. Recent criticism of Sanders' bipartisanship. Airstrike that killed Iran general, conflict in Afghanistan. Experience working with others in D.C. Addiction treatment, gun policy, Supreme Court abortion, criminal justice and race, Michael Bloomberg and billionaires in politics, U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, climate change, ending childhood poverty. Those were a number of topics at the debate last night. 2020 Democratic presidential debate, addiction treatment. Let's take a look at this video from WMUR News 9, Monica Hernandez.
Explore the world just like J.C. Marie Smith with the City Advantage Platinum Select Card. With travel benefits at her fingertips, J.C. can fit right in at the center of the world's most vibrant spectacles. Experience more meaningful moments with the card built for your adventure.
An honor to be here in our community. We know Granite Staters are engaged, and we know there are issues that strike especially close to home here. New Hampshire has one of the highest rates of deadly overdoses in the country. In some cases, police and paramedics tell us that they are saving the same lives again and again, sometimes more than once in a single day. It's a healthcare issue, but it's also so much more. Mayor Buttigieg, you have described yourself as a moderate, but one of your policies at least goes further than some on the stage with you are willing to go. You have called for the decriminalization of all drugs. Does that include heroin, meth, and cocaine, some of the drugs that have contributed to this crisis?
No, what I've called for is that incarceration should no longer be the response to drug possession.
With all all due respect, Mayor Buttigieg, on your website it says that you called for decriminalization of all drugs.
Again, what I'm calling for is that we end the use of incarceration as a response. This does not mean that it will be lawful to produce or distribute those kinds of harmful drugs. But also, as we know from the opioid crisis, some of this has been driven by companies that were acting irresponsibly with substances that were lawful. It's why in South Bend we sued those companies to hold them accountable. We've got to make sure that there is accountability for those who suppressed evidence about the addictiveness of those substances, even while we're also coming to recognize that these kinds of addiction are a medical issue, not a moral failure on the part of somebody battling that addiction. That's why medication-assisted treatment is so important. And those people who are being revived, and our own EMTs in my city have been so frustrated by the experience of reviving somebody, but then they have nowhere to go. Sometimes you get brought back with a dose of Narcan, but then your life depends on whether in the days that follow you make it until somebody can actually see you, because we have such a shortage of mental health and addiction providers in this country. We must act to change that and save lives when we do.
I want to bring this question now to Mr. Yang. You've said you would decriminalize opioids, but you've also said that you would require all overdose patients to go to mandatory treatment centers for 3 days. Well, right now in New Hampshire, there aren't enough beds in treatment centers and across the country. How would you make sure treatment is available for all overdose patients? And what would you do to fill the gap in the meantime?
That's what we have to change, Monica. I've heard heartbreaking stories from families here in New Hampshire that have been destroyed, torn apart by the opiate epidemic. And you have to look at the companies that profited to the tune of tens of billions of dollars in profits of essentially blood money. As president, we will take back those profits and put them to work right here in New Hampshire so that if you are seeking treatment, you have resources to be able to pursue it. This is not a money problem fundamentally, this is a human problem, but money cannot be the obstacle. This is something that happened on the government's watch. The government allowed this opiate epidemic to spread throughout our communities, and we have to do everything in our power to actually make sure that if you're seeking treatment, you know you're not going to be sent to jail. We have safe injection and safe consumption sites for you. If you have a family member who's struggling, you can refer them and know that they're not going to have criminal penalties as a result. There is so much about this that's endemic to what's happened throughout the country in terms of companies running amok, this hyper-corporate capitalism where if money's on one side in this country and people are on the other side, the money is winning. You can see it with the opiate epidemic. You can see it with the military-industrial complex, the fossil fuel companies. This is what we must change, and that's where I'll lead as president.
Senator Klobuchar, I want to take the question to you now. As a prosecutor, you embrace tough-on-crime policies, even with drug offenders. You've also spoken many times about your father's own addiction issues, his own alcoholism, and his DUI arrests. If addiction is a disease, should people be arrested for it? And as a prosecutor, do you regret sending people with substance abuse issues to jail?
I led one of the most successful drug courts in the country in Hennepin County. And I always would say and believed, and I think my record shows this, that we weren't a business. We didn't want to see repeat customers. And if you don't want to see repeat customers, the only answer is treatment. And maybe you're referring to some of the people who were dealing big time in drugs. Yes, I felt that we should prosecute those people. But when it comes to, and you asked Mr. Yang a question, and I think we owe it to the people of New Hampshire that had one of the biggest addiction rates in the country and death rates when it comes to opioids, to explain how we will pay for the treatment and the beds. I've been very clear about this. There's going to be a major settlement coming through, a federal settlement against all these opioid manufacturers. The evidence is overwhelming, including an email where one guy, a business guy, says to the other, they're eating them like Doritos. Just keep pumping them out. We will get a conservative estimate, $40 billion in from that settlement. We can put a 2 cents per milligram tax on opioids that brings in another $40 billion. Then you can close the hedge fund loophole. That brings in $18 billion. And just like every other policy I've proposed, and I think New Hampshire voters should care about this, I have showed how I'm going to pay for it. because I think we have someone in the White House that has told over 15,000 lies. He makes all kinds of promises. The people of New Hampshire and the people of our country deserve better. I will get this done, and it is personal for me.
Okay, and there you go on that video on that topic that they had last night. Another topic was gun policies. Let's watch that topic. And WMUR News 9 Adam Sexton did that topic and asked the candidates about gun policies.
Infinity Home. Disarm the system. Doors open.
Welcome to the neighborhood.
Secure your home with X1 and customize your security with Xfinity Home. Awarded top pick by CNET. Simple, easy, awesome.
New Hampshire is a battleground not just for presidential contenders, but also for top issues, and that includes gun policy. Senator Sanders, for many voters in this Democratic primary, your allure is about consistency. When it comes to progressive issues, you've been on the right side of them for a long time. One exception is gun rights. In the 90s, when you were in Congress, you voted against background checks, and you also voted against a waiting period for purchase of a firearm. Can you explain why you opposed these things that you now support?
I can, Adam, and let me also say that in 1988, I probably lost a race for Congress, and we only have one congressperson in the whole state. Because in 1988, I said that we should ban the sale and distribution of assault weapons in this country. That was 30 years ago. Furthermore, I am very proud that today I have a D- voting record from the NRA. And under my administration, it will be the American people doing gun policy, not dictated by the NRA. But to answer your question, I come, like New Hampshire, from a very, very rural state. In Vermont, until the last 2 years ago, we had virtually no gun control legislation at all, and I represented that perspective. The world has changed. In Vermont and in New Hampshire and all over this country, people are sickened by the mass shootings that we have seen and the gun violence that we have seen. The world has changed and my views have changed. And my view is right now, we need universal background checks. We end the gun show loophole. We end the so-called straw man provision. We make certain that we end the sale and distribution of assault weapons in this country. And we go further. But the bottom line is I will not be intimidated by the NRA. We're going to run the gun policy that the American people want.
Vice President Biden, you've taken a lot of heat in this primary on these debate stages and from voters here in New Hampshire for your past positions. You've essentially asked them to look at the totality of your record and give you the benefit of the doubt. Does Senator Sanders deserve that same benefit of the doubt on guns?
Well, look, here's the deal. The biggest mistake that Bernie made, that Senator Sanders made, he voted to give the gun manufacturers, the only major industry in America, a loophole that does not allow them to be sued for the carnage they are creating. First thing I'll do as president is work to get rid of that. It's going to be hard. Think of all the thousands and thousands of people who died. And I might add, Bernie, while you were representing your constituency, an awful lot of people that are a gun state and they've come around. In fact, all those folks in California, New York, Pennsylvania, they were getting killed by the thousands during this same period. I come from a state that's a major gun-owning state. I introduced the first assault weapons ban. I, in fact, got it passed. I'm the only guy that beat the NRA twice. While I was pushing the Brady background checks, Bernie voted 5 times against it when he was in the House. So look, the other thing is that when we have to be held accountable for the things we did. I'm the guy that set up drug courts. I set them up. I wrote it into law, and it never got funded. And also on opioids, I'm the guy who's already begun to make a down payment. In the Cures Act, I put in $1 billion to fight opioid addiction. And lastly, my time is going to be up shortly. Here's the deal. Those chief executive officers of those drug companies, they should not only be fined, they should go to jail.
Senator Warren, we'd like to go to you now. Yeah. Plans count for a lot. I want to ask you this question here, though. Laws can do so much. If you could change one thing about America's gun culture, what would it be?
Look, we have a gun violence problem in America. It is about the mass shootings that we hear about in our schools and that frighten us, about in theaters and in churches. It's also, though, about shootings that occur on sidewalks and in playgrounds, often in communities of color that are hit hardest. But there are no headlines over those. It's also about suicide and the increased lethality of suicide because of the availability of guns. It is also about the increased chances that it's usually a woman will die of domestic violence if she is with a violent man and a gun is in the home. We need to think of this problem not as one and done or three things and done. We need to think of it just like we did on auto safety. We just keep coming back. We treat it like the public health emergency that it is. But the question we should be asking ourselves is when America, across this country, including gun owners, agree in certain basic things, universal background checks, get assault weapons off the streets, why can we not even get a vote in the United States Senate? And the answer is 90%. Think about this. More than 90% of Americans agree on this. We can't get a vote in the United States Senate because it is the gun industry that continues to call the shots. Until we attack the corruption in Washington, the influence of money on campaigns and lobbying, we're not going to be able to meet our promises. And one more, until we agree that we are willing to roll back the filibuster, the gun industry is going to continue to have a veto, and we will never make the changes we make. We have to be willing to build a future that works, not for a gun industry, but that works for the rest of America and protects our children.
Got to be able to sue the gun industry.
Thank you, candidates. We're going to go back to David up there at the home.
Adam, Monica, thank you.
Okay, and there you go on gun policy. That was another big subject of the night last night. Adam Sexton shares his impressions of debate last night. Let's take a listen to that video from WMUR News 9.
New Hampshire primary day, Tuesday, February 11th, is an historic moment. Together, we
have our own Adam Sexton with us, who was asking questions on the big stage tonight. Congratulations. Good night for you.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, good night for New Hampshire in general, and it's such an exciting moment. You know, it's like Christmas and the Super Bowl all rolled into one here. This is really one of those showcases.
So what are your thoughts on? We were just talking that it was kind of surprising to hear Joe Biden indicate at the very top of his first statement out of the gate that he probably won't do real well in New Hampshire.
I think this debate didn't have one of those sort of knockout moments or sort of one of those posterized kind of things where there was a takedown or anything that people are going to really remember. But right off the bat, how odd was that Joe Biden came out and said, yeah, I took a hit in Iowa, I'm probably going to take a hit here in New Hampshire. This is the former Vice President of the United States, one of the front runners in this race for a long time. And the polls show him basically bleeding out support to Pete Buttigieg right now in a dramatic fashion. And for him to make that kind of admission on a national debate stage, gosh, I don't think I've ever seen anything like that, having covered the primary for now 4 cycles. But a couple other things that stood out to me. Pete Buttigieg, who's on the rise in those polls, played it pretty safe tonight. You saw him sort of take what was given and always with the message of unity. Came back to that theme again and again. He's really looking, it sounds to me, for those independent and undeclared voters here in New Hampshire, and as he likes to call them, the quote, future former Republicans. If there are those people out here in New Hampshire who were Republican and don't like President Trump and they're looking for an alternative, he is making that play over and over again. So if people were looking for him to fight back against the insults or anything like that, it was almost like every time he was pivoting toward, okay, I'll take that incoming, I'll address it, and then I'm going to talk to you, these New Hampshire voters. One last thing, Amy Klobuchar, my little boxing scorecard here, she had the most zingers by far. Calling Pete the cool newcomer was a repeated thing there. Also on Bernie Sanders, you can't out-divide the divider-in-chief. So she landed a few punches, got some zingers in here and there, but really a great night across the board for all of these candidates.
Congratulations to dissect over the weekend, I would say. Thank you, Adam.
Okay, and there you go. And Adam and Monica Hernandez did a wonderful job last night. Analysts Cullen-Bulcher, Sanders winning of debate. Let's take a listen to that video from WMUR News 9, Tim Callery and Scott Spradling.
We all care about education. Investing in the next generation requires some serious resources, but we spend $1 billion.
Well, Jen and Tom, the spin room is spinning right now. It's live and wow, there's a lot of activity going on. And you said, Scott, to me earlier that the spin room kind of gave you an idea of how this debate went tonight.
You bet. I think the buzz right now is about Amy Klobuchar. She seemed to do very well. She was substantive. She had good one-liners. And the buzz around here is that if you had to pick a winner in tonight's performance, it's definitely her.
You also said Sanders came out on top, too, as well.
I think so. The bottom line with Bernie Sanders is he needed to come in, if he's the front runner, as we all believe, he needed to come in and not lose this thing tonight. He parried and jumped out of the way of any attacks. He did a good job of explaining his own views. If he was the front runner coming in tonight, he's still the front runner going out.
And Mayor Pete saying he's coming off of momentum from Iowa. Did he keep that momentum here tonight?
I would think that Pete Buttigieg, I think, slightly underperformed. There was a lot of expectation around him, a lot of eyes on him, but he also was basically attacked by everyone else on the stage, which is sort of a first in this dynamic. He defended himself pretty well, and he didn't stand out. He did a fine job. He didn't lose it. But the question I have is, if it's a comparison between him and Joe Biden, where do we go from here? Because Joe Biden started his entire night basically saying, well, I had a tough night in Iowa, and I think I'm going to have a tough night in New Hampshire on Tuesday. So he already handicapped himself right out of the race. Very surprising. I'm not sure Joe, even though he threw a lot of punches, landed any of them against the other candidates.
So what does he have to do? I mean, four days away, how can he reassure his followers that he's the man for this job?
It's a tough sell when you open up with, I don't think I'm going to do very well on Tuesday. That's a really tough sell. What this does, I think, is it opens up a really broad opening for someone like Buttigieg to build on the Iowa momentum and have a good, strong weekend going into Tuesday. So it's unclear. I still think Bernie Sanders is the guy to beat for New Hampshire, but with 45% of those polled saying they could still change their mind between now and Tuesday, this is still a wide open race.
Right. Anyone's game going into Tuesday right now.
Certainly is.
And we've heard from a lot of voters ourselves. A lot of people are still undecided.
That's right. Yeah, the polls are definitely showing that you've got at least 1 in 10 who absolutely are going to vote, but don't know who they're going to vote for. I think tonight certainly showcased some great options. You've got primaries within a primary between Sanders and Warren, but you've also got the one between what I would say right now is Joe Biden and Pete Buttigieg. With Amy Klobuchar as this crazy X factor who has worked really hard in New Hampshire. So it's still a bit of a jump ball, but if you got to put money down, you still got to sort of think about Bernie Sanders.
Right. And as for Joe Biden, if he doesn't do well in New Hampshire, is this the end of his campaign, his presidency run?
So if he finishes below 3rd place, he's going to have a lot of explaining to do to the people of South Carolina, because at that point, that is his backstop. At the moment, he's leading in the polls in South Carolina because he's very strong among the African-American vote there. But if he does poorly again in New Hampshire, I'm not sure what case he makes to the people of South Carolina, because now it turns into a Hail Mary.
All right, sounds good. All eyes again on New Hampshire the next 4 days. We'll see how things turn. A lot of undecided voters, but of course, they'll make their final decisions on Tuesday. Jen and Tom will send it back to...
Okay, and there you go on that video from WMUR News 9, Scott Spradling and Tim Callery. Scott Spradling does a great job with analyzing politics. Keep up the great work, Scott Spradling. ABC News political director Rick Klein analyzes latest Democratic debate. Let's take a look at that video from WMUR News 9. Erin Falo from WMUR News 9 got to sit down with him and ask him questions. Let's watch the video.
And we're actually here today to officially launch our campaign to win the great state of New Hampshire in 2020. The best is yet to come.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
As we continue our Commitment 2020 coverage of last night's debate, we are now joined by ABC News political analyst Rick Klein. Thanks for coming in so early. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Right out of the gate, I want to start with something that former Vice President Joe Biden said last night, and let's take a listen.
It's the long race. I took a hit in Iowa, and I'll probably take a hit here.
So he's setting the bar low for New Hampshire. What do you think about his showing in Iowa? What do you think he has to do here in New Hampshire?
It was a stunning moment to me because he's basically signaling to his supporters, I know I'm not going to win here.
Mm-hmm.
To me, he was trying to recalibrate expectations. He came in a very disappointing fourth place in Iowa. They dumped a lot of time and money there. He's well known and liked in New Hampshire. You'd think this is a state that he'd be competitive. He's now saying, we recognize that we're not going to do it. He's trying to now elongate the primary to get people to look beyond New Hampshire. I think recognizing that he could come in fourth, maybe even fifth, in New Hampshire, his collapse just not heading in the right. His collapse seems to be in a lot of the different coalitions of the support. Things are just not heading in the right direction.
And he's looking forward to the next contest where there's more a diverse population, I guess.
100%. He's looking at South Carolina in particular, where polling suggests he is the strong front runner. He's going to test that proposition, though, because he's been making a case that he's the most electable candidate. That's a hard case to make if you're not winning elections.
A lot of people were talking about Amy Klobuchar last night and saying that she had a really strong night.
I thought she was terrific. I think she did exactly what people who've known her a long time said she could do, which is just portray herself as a regular person, a problem solver, a fixer, someone who had some common sense views on things, and pretty nice smile at the end of it too. She came in as a happy warrior with this. She wasn't out there really attacking, although she had some harsh lines about Pete Buttigieg and his experience, about Bernie Sanders, his ability to work with Republicans. I think for voters who are looking for kind of a middle of the road type of option, she pointed out that her age is sort of right in the middle of Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden as well.
I think a lot of people thought that Mayor Pete's showing out in Iowa was kind of a surprise.
Yeah.
How do you think he fared last night in the debate?
Well, he has the hot hand right now, and I think people are giving him a look in New Hampshire. He's getting bigger crowds around the state, and I'd expect that to continue right through Tuesday. I think he had one of his weaker moments so far, talking about his record of arrests of minorities over marijuana and drug crimes in South Bend, Indiana. That's going to be an issue for him, not just in New Hampshire but beyond. But look, I think he's an enormous political talent, and coming off of what was essentially a tie in Iowa, he's got a lot of momentum heading into Tuesday.
And seeing what happened out in Iowa, does that make the contest here in the Granite State all that much more weighty?
Oh, yeah, it puts this contest on steroids, because not having any kind of a real result to point to has surprised a lot of people. So normally you'd have the Iowa caucuses, people might drop out, you know where things stand. I think the delayed reaction of what we saw in Iowa, the debacle of the election returns, means that New Hampshire may actually have final official results before Iowa, even though it goes 8 days later. And I think people are looking to this contest to provide some of the answers that we thought Iowa would earlier in the week.
What do you think the candidates have to focus on now as we head into the primary?
I think the two things is turnout and just getting your people out, because almost everyone votes on Election Day in New Hampshire. This is not an early vote state, as everyone knows. You have to actually go to the polls on that day. And the second, I think, is just hitting the right message in that close. Getting yourself in the right mix, getting in people's television screens, finding out how to reach people in the way that matters for this moment, because it is a tense moment, it is a hectic moment. There's been so much going on in the world in the last couple of days, and you have to convince people this is where you want to park your support.
They also kind of put on a united front in a way at some times last night.
Oh yeah, I don't think anyone that's a Democratic primary voter wants to see the Democrats rip each other's faces off at this stage. I mean, there's so much going on with Donald Trump and the impeachment acquittal this week. Even coming into the debate last night, to know that he had fired people that were involved in providing testimony. I think Democrats want to be united, and they're looking for a candidate and get that done.
Well, they're going to be busy this weekend, and of course, it looks like the weather's going to be good for turnout.
We love
on
it.
Tuesday. Rick Klein, thank you so much for coming in. We appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, there you go. That was Rick Klein, political director for ABC News. Democrat candidates meet for debate before the big New Hampshire primaries. Let's watch that video from ABC News.
Imagine feeling fearless and walk into the dentist. Imagine a mouthwash that strengthens your enamel while preventing cavities up to 70%. Act Anti-Cavity Rinse. For a confident feeling in your oral health, stop imagining. Start acting.
Let's get right to our top story here. Just days before the New Hampshire primary, the Democratic candidates meet for a primetime debate right here on ABC.
The two candidates who led the Iowa caucus feeling the heat on the debate stage. Pete Buttigieg facing criticism over his lack of experience, while Bernie Sanders faced concerns about his Democratic Socialist label.
So many questions coming out of the debate. Who fared best? Who faltered? And will any of this change the fundamental dynamics in this race? We have team coverage this morning, and we start with ABC's Rachel Scott, who's right there in Manchester, New Hampshire, where the debate went down overnight. Rachel, good morning to you.
Dan, good morning. With the New Hampshire primary now just days away, this was one of the final opportunities for these candidates to make their pitch. And they came out swinging, piling on the attacks on the two candidates who claimed victory out of Iowa, Mayor Pete Buttigieg and Senator Bernie Sanders. Overnight, Mayor Pete Buttigieg and Senator Bernie Sanders on top in Iowa caucuses, both targets on the debate stage.
It is not real, Bernie, because 2/3 of the Democrats in the Senate are not on your bill, and because it would kick 149 million Americans off their current health insurance in 4 years.
We need people with experience. That's why I'm worried about Mayor Pete.
Buttigieg, who has pitched himself as the newcomer Washington needs, challenged on his experience. His rivals calling his resume thin.
We have a newcomer in the White House, and look where it got us.
We need a perspective right now that will finally allow us to leave the politics of the past in the past, turn the page, and bring change to Washington before it's too late.
Now just 3 days out from the New Hampshire primary, a trailing Joe Biden already bracing for another gut punch.
I took a hit in Iowa, and I'll probably take a hit here.
The former VP still insisting some of his rivals are too much of a risk. A fiery clash over electability and concern over the future of the party.
Bernie's labeled himself, not me, a Democratic Socialist. I think that's the label that the president's going to lay on everyone running with Bernie if he's a nominee.
Let me just ask, is anyone else on the stage concerned about having a Democratic Socialist at the top of the Democratic ticket?
I'm not.
Senator Klobuchar?
Bernie and I work together all the time, but I think we are not going to be able to out-divide the divider-in-chief. And I think we need someone to head up this ticket that actually brings people with her instead of shutting them out.
Sanders also on defense about his signature health care plan.
How much is it going to cost? Who's going to pay for it? It will cost more than the entire federal budget we spend now.
If we do what Joe wants, we'll be spending some $50 trillion on healthcare over the next 10 years. What Medicare for All will do is save the average American substantial sums of money.
The conversation turning to race 90 minutes in.
We have not said one word tonight about race. Not one word. Are you kidding me?
Buttigieg, who has struggled to attract support among black voters, pressed on his record.
How do you explain the increase in black arrests in South Bend under your leadership for marijuana possession?
And again, the overall rate was lower.
No, there was an increase. The year before you were in office, it was lower.
We adopted a strategy that said that drug enforcement would be targeted in cases where there was a connection to the most violent group or gang connected to a murder. These things are all connected, but that's the point. So are all of the things that need to change in order for us to prevent violence and remove the effects of systemic racism.
Senator Warren, is that a substantial answer from Mayor Buttigieg?
No. The debate, a bookend to a critical week.
We watched on Wednesday as Republicans, all but one, locked arms to protect him from impeachment.
President Trump acquitted in the Senate, the impeachment trial closing as the 2020 campaign now kicks into high gear.
We move the country forward. We don't focus on the mistakes of the leaders that are leaving office.
And the candidates also going after a Democrat who was not on that stage. Billionaire Michael Bloomberg, the former New York City mayor, is not campaigning in the state, but could possibly qualify for the Nevada debate later this month, Dan.
Not over on the stage, but looming over the race in many ways. Rachel, thank you so much.
Okay, and there you go on that video. And that does it for this special of a recap of the ABC News and WMUR Democratic debate. And again, if you watched the debate last night, comment below and let us know, and what did you think of it? And thank you for watching this special. Good night, goodbye, and good night, everyone. And I'll see you back here tomorrow with more news coverage. Bye.